Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel, Cooking for the Family. I'm Dyvonne, and today I'm going to share with you my recipe for Crockpot apple butter. These are the ingredients that I'm going to be using. Are you ready to hang out with me and make some apple butter? So first, what I like to do is we're going to go ahead and prepare our apples. Now for the Crockpot apple butter, I use a variety of apples. A lot of them are going to come from my apple tree. My apple tree is a Golden Delicious. So a lot of them are going to come from my apple tree, but I also mix in other apples. Now for the apple butter, I've actually been making it for about 11 or 12 years now, right around there. And as far as using a variety of apples to make my apple butter, I'm going to share with you why that is, as well as I'm going to share with you towards the end of the video if you want to go through the canning process and can your apple butter and present it to people as gifts. To me, it is the least expensive homemade gift, or one of the least expensive homemade gifts that you can give to someone. And even if you don't want to go through the canning and the preserving of your apple butter, if you don't want to go through that process, you can still be able to jar it up and give it to people as gifts, and I'll share with you more about that as well. So what I'm doing is I'm going on and I'm slicing up the pieces of the apple. Now when it comes to slicing up the apple, you want to have them about this size, no thicker than about an inch, half an inch, round about there is what I like to do, and no bigger than, say, a size of a nickel, size of a dime. Just right up in there is typically a good size. And so we go ahead and I put all of my sliced apples in there. Now total, you're going to be using 6 pounds of apples. 6 pounds of medium-sized apples is going to be around about 16 to about 18 apples. At 14, you can get away with 14 apples, but if the apples are pretty large. But for medium-sized apples, you're going to look at about 16 to about 18 apples. So once I have all my apples cut, then I add my sugar. I'm using light brown sugar, and that was a half a cup of packed light brown sugar and a half a cup of regular granulated sugar. Once I put my sugars in, I just kind of break up the light brown sugar, move stuff around for a bit. Then we're going to put in our cinnamon. I'm going to put in 1 tablespoon of cinnamon, 1 tablespoon of ground cinnamon. And I'm also going to use some nutmeg as well. And for my nutmeg, we're going to use ground nutmeg, and I'm putting in a half of a teaspoon of nutmeg. So that was 1 tablespoon of cinnamon and a half a teaspoon of nutmeg. Next, we're going to put in a little bit of salt, and this is just regular salt, and I'm putting in 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And so that all goes into the crock pot. Now I'm also going to put in some fresh squeezed lemon juice just for brightness, minus any little seeds that are in there. So I'm going to put in 1 tablespoon of fresh squeezed lemon juice as well. Now you may have noticed that with my apple butter, I didn't use like a lot of sugar. We just used a half a cup of regular granulated sugar and a half a cup of light brown sugar. Now when you get towards the middle of your cooking process, you can taste your apple butter, and if you want yours to be a little bit sweeter, you can go ahead and add more sugar, more granulated sugar to your apple butter, and I would do that as in tablespoon increments, just a little bit at a time in tablespoon increments. If you want a little sweeter apple butter, I like to make mine a little less sweet, so that way the apples and the spices really come through like that. But because apples, they can be sometimes sweeter or tartar, just depending on the season or the batch of apples you get. So sometimes we do have to sweeten it up just a tad. And so you can do that at that time. So I go ahead and I mix everything together, making sure that I coat the apples as best as I can with the sugars as well as the spices. I put the top on, and then I cook it for the first hour on high. And this is what it looks like after cooking on high for that first hour. Your apples will still be firm, but they will start to release some of their natural juices. And so when you move your apples around your crock pot, you're going to see some juice already. And do you see that? And you see the spices in there, our cinnamon and our nutmeg. And so after that first hour, this is what it needs to look like. They're still going to be firm. Your apples will still be firm. However, they will start to release all their natural juices, which is really nice, and that's what you want. So after the first hour on high, we're going to go ahead, put the top back on our crock pot, and we're going to change our temperature from high to low, and we're going to set it for 9 hours. And I like to check on mine when there's about 3 hours left of our cooking time. You don't have to check on it at that time. You can just let it cook the total of the 9 hours. In some cases, it may take even just 8 hours, but I like to check on mine when it's been about 3 hours that we have left. Now, if you are new to my channel, welcome in. And if you're a returner, welcome back. And if you have subscribed to my channel, I truly appreciate it. I also appreciate all your likes, your shares, your good vibe comments. And if you have not subscribed, I hope you enjoy the content and consider subscribing. So this is what it's looking like when we've got about 3 hours left. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put the top back on. And like I said, this is just a step that I like to do, but if you don't get a chance to do it at that last 3 hours that's left, that's okay. So once we put the top on, we let it go ahead and continue. Now I've got about an hour and a half left, and I like to see what it's looking like at this point, because depending on the apples, some it might be ready. So you might be ready to go. Your apple butter might be, done. But during that last hour and a half or so, I just check it. It's not only just reduced down, but it's also thickened up. It's starting to thicken up a lot. So at this point, I use my potato masher, and I go in and I mash everything up. Now, we like to have our apple butter to have little bits and little chunks in there of the apple. It'll be nice and tender when we spread them on our biscuits and our English muffins and toast and scones. It goes with so many good things. Now, if you want smooth apple butter, you can always take your apple butter and use either an immersion blender, or either you can take it through a nice strainer, just push it through a strainer, or either you can push it through a sieve and get that smooth apple butter if that's what you like. But like this, it comes out really great. And so, but you have that choice, just kind of depending on what you want. And so this is what it's looking like right now. It is looking really good. I'm going to let it thicken up just a little bit. So I'm going to let it go for about another half hour, and then we're going to go ahead and turn it off. Well, our apple butter has gone on and finished up that last half hour. It is looking good. It has thickened up, reduced down. It's a beautiful, rich color. As I take my spoon through my apple butter, it just leaves like that little bit of a streak, and that's what we want. It is looking really good. It's smelling so good right now in the kitchen as well. Those nice spices, the cinnamon, the nutmeg, and the apple. The kitchen just smelling good, y'all. And so for my lids and for my jars, my lids and my rings, for my lids and my rings, what I did was I wash everything in hot soapy water. And then with the lids and the rings, I don't boil them, but I give them a little gentle simmer in some hot water. My jars, I went on and I boiled them till they were nice and hot and just started to boil. Then I use my lifter, my jar lifter. I take those out because we want our jars to be nice and hot, as well as whatever you're filling your jar with, you also want that to be hot or definitely very warm. I'm going to use my funnel, my canning funnel, and I go ahead and I fill up my jar. Now this is a 4-ounce jar that I'm using. These are 4-ounce ball jars that I'm using, and we're going to fill them just to a particular point, not to the tippy top. We're going to end up leaving around the edge a 1/4 of an inch around the edge. And how we do that is that we're going to be using this. This is going to help get out our air bubbles, as well as those little measures, those little steps that you're measuring. And so we take our measure and we go around the top just like this, because you want to make sure that your ingredients with your jar, you want to make sure that your ingredients are within that measurable part. So each recipe is different, but when it comes to apple butter, you're going to leave at least a 1/4 of the inch from the top, and that's what that little measure right there is for. Now the other end helps us to get out our air bubbles, and so we go in from the inside, from the sides, and we push inward, because you don't want any air bubbles or air pockets in your jars. So we go around making sure that we're getting rid of any air pockets, any air bubbles in there, because like I said, we don't want that in. And so I just kind of double check it, making sure that there's no air bubbles in the bottom around the sides. And then I use a clean cloth and I go around the top and I go around the sides just to make sure that there's no apple butter or anything that's on the top or hanging around the side. Then I go ahead and I fit the lid. on my jar, and then I also put the ring on and I fit that as well. Now when it comes to tightening, you don't want to do it super tight. I just do it just till it's finger tight, not super tight, just till it's finger tight, just a couple of turns till finger tight. And then I'm going to take the jar and I'm going to set it back inside of the pot that I have the hot water that the jars were boiling in earlier, the clear jars were boiling in earlier. So I go ahead and do that, and then I repeat that process with all of my jars of the apple butter. Now in the description box below, I will put the link to the Ball site on canning, preserving, the history of canning, and just all those wonderful things. And it's just a wonderful resource. And so in the description box below, I will have a link to that site, and it goes even deeper in detail. If I went in total detail here, this video would last an hour for sure. And so this is just an overview of how I like to go ahead and I do the canning. Now something else, if that you don't want to do the canning process, what you would do is you would still use these types of jars, the 4-ounce jars, wash them all with hot soapy water, you dry them all, go ahead and fill them with your apple butter. Once your apple butter is cool, then you would fill them with your apple butter, the jars, the cool jars, put the lids on, tighten up your ring, and you would store them in your refrigerator versus storing them on your shelf or in your pantry or your cabinet. You would store them in the refrigerator, and they will last up to 6 weeks just like that. And you can give them to your family and friends, just with letting them know that you need to go ahead and enjoy it within a 6-week time frame. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and finish up filling my jars, and then I'm going to share with you how to process the step of processing your jars in the boiling water. So I've gone on and I have my jars in my water. I have a couple of inches above the lid. While the top is on my pot, once it starts to boil and you hear that rolling boil and my little jars are just jingling around in there, and you see I have this rolling boil, it's going to do a rolling boil for 10 minutes, and that's called processing. I do a rolling boil for 10 minutes. I don't start the time when I first put the lid on because it's not boiling yet. You start the time when it starts to boil. Once it's boiled for the 10 minutes, turn off my pot. I go ahead and turn off my pot, and I let my jar sit in the hot water for 10 minutes. And these are all our jars that we did. We made a total of 11 4-ounce jars from our recipe. We're going to let these sit for 24 hours, and then I'll bring you back. Our jars have set undisturbed for 24 hours. After they've sat for that 24 hours, then we can go ahead and test our lids. I went on and I decorated one to show you how I do it. I just take a piece of cloth. I get the cloth and the decorations. You can get them from Joann's or Michael's. I got this from Joann's. My little labels, and then of course we have our jars. I'm going to go ahead and open up a jar here. And so also what I do is I go ahead and I wipe off the jars because sometimes there's just some residue from them boiling in the water. So I unscrew my jar, and this is how we test our seals. So we look at it, that center part, it should not be making any noise. It should be suctioned down. I go ahead and I lift it. I'm holding it by the rim. And you see there, I'm holding it by the rim. It's not coming up. I use the little thumb test. I go around the top trying to pluck that top off. And it should be nice and sealed. I should not be able to lift that top at all. This is looking good. My seal is looking good. And I go through and I do that process with all of my jars that I've done. And so this is my other jar. I've gone through and I've checked on my jars already. And on my lids, I'll be putting the expiration date as far as best by, or what I want people to enjoy by. These are going to be good for another year, and you can actually go all the way up to 2 years. I usually like to do it within a year though. And so this is what it's looking like. I'm going to go ahead and take the lid off of this one, and so I'll share with you what that looks like. And now when you take the lid off, it should give you some resistance, and it's just going to like make a big pop when you open it. And you see how I'm struggling a little bit because this is a good seal. And there we go. And so it's sealed perfectly. It's looking good. All my jars are shelf stable. And so this is good. This is our apple butter. I've made some homemade English muffins from scratch. In the description box below, I'll put a link to my vlog on my homemade English muffins. We're going to go ahead and open them up. They are nice, soft, and fluffy. There is nothing like homemade English muffins, and these come out really good. So I'm going to try some of our homemade apple butter. It is spreading nicely. You see all that nice cinnamon and nutmeg in there. We've got those little chunks of apple, but the chunks of apple are nice and smoothable. They just smooth and spread right out. So this bite right here, this first bite's for you. Go ahead and take your bite. Now I'm going to take my bite and see how we did today. Wow. Remember I was sharing with you earlier to use a variety of apples, and the reason why you want to use a variety of apples is it gives your apple butter a very well-rounded and wonderful flavor by using a variety of apples. And so I'm using the Golden Delicious. I had some Red Delicious as well, some Granny Smith, and also some Honey Crisp. In the description box below, I'll have all the information for you to make this wonderful apple butter. You can also, like I was saying, give this to family and friends. I go ahead and I put my label on. You can use a nice little holiday cloth that you can decorate with the ribbon. Well, that is it for me today. I hope you enjoyed spending time with me in my kitchen. I hope you give this recipe a try. Have a wonderful fall. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're not subscribed. Go ahead, show this video some love, give it a thumbs up, and click share. And share this video with a friend or family. And remember, it's always good when Dyvonne is cooking for the family. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye, everybody.